Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a doof media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, he's the James Franco of podcasting. It's Matt Friedman. How's it going today, Matt?
Well, in this particular case, it means that I'm depressive, surly, angry, miserable, and just a total killjoy. So
yeah, and not even at the bad parts of the show, just through it all.
Yeah,
you're just that. That's just who you are.
Yeah, that's who I am deep inside. Yep.
This week on the show, we are wrapping up our coverage of Stephen King's 11/22/63 by taking a look at the Hulu original series 11.22.63. We're going to spend the next hour or so talking all about this show. So I guess we should say, Matt, spoilers?
Yeah.
Spoilers?
Spoilers for, well, this show is so different from the books that we might as well specify spoilers for the show.
Mm-hmm.
As distinct from spoilers for the books, and also spoilers for the books for them.
Yeah. I mean, if this is your first episode of Kingslingers, welcome. This is a hell of a first episode to walk into. We hope you enjoy it. Matt, this show. So a little bit of background here. 11.22.63. I still don't know why they changed how the dates worked. I'm just guessing search engine optimization at this point. Like, it's the only thing I can think of there. But see, on the poster, one of the dots is stylized as red, like a bullet or something. I don't know.
I got our bullet hole. I mean, I guess so. I think you're absolutely right, actually, that it's got to be for search engine optimization, because otherwise you just absolutely will never find the movie.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, entering that into Google, I feel like would be weird. But yeah, this show was produced by J.J. Abrams, our old friend. You will not see, I think it's funny, we just talked about Castle Rock and how Greg Grunberg appeared in that because he's J.J. Abrams' best friend and he appears in all this stuff. No Grunberg here in this show, Matt, unfortunately. I don't know why he couldn't work him in. Maybe he was in the background somewhere and I just didn't see him, but no speaking role for sure.
I did not see him either. Wow, what a shame.
This show came out in 2016, in the summer of 2016, for the, at that point, fledgling streaming platform Hulu. Interestingly enough, it has since left Hulu, despite being something produced on Hulu. And so that means you and I, to watch the show, had to pay $20, even though we both have active Hulu subscriptions. So that wasn't too fun.
Yeah, it kind of started off on the wrong foot, I'll say.
Yeah. It was created by a woman named Bridget Carpenter, who also worked on the Friday Night Lights television show and Westworld as well. Was a writer on those shows. Matt, 11.22.6. I'm going to stop doing the dot thing now, so just assume it's there.
Okay.
Every time I say the name of the show. What did you think of 11.22.63?
I thought it was not very good, and what else? Yeah, I'll say a couple things up front. It was baffling in many places. They made a lot of changes that ripped out the heart and charm and sweetness of the story, and then they made a lot of plot changes that were complex and confusing, but ultimately netted out in no real difference. There may be a couple of plot changes that I actually thought were fun. Mostly toward the latter half of things. And then finally, I'll say the last episode took me from just being ready to just rip into the show and make fun of it with you for an hour or so, to being okay, they did actually stick the landing, and that matters.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the high level, all of my general thoughts on the show. What did you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely remember watching the show when it came out in 2016. And I remember having relatively fond memories of it. I had not read the book since it had originally come out, so it had been about 5 years, I guess, since I read the book. And so my knowledge of the book was shaky, and so I probably did not notice immediately the sheer number of departures from the novel that this show takes. But I want to state here, and we've said this before, and I'll say it again, I am not by itself against adaptations taking creative liberty with stuff and veering from the novel in ways that they choose to. Like, I don't think that is the reason I struggled with this show this time around. I certainly, like, there were certainly moments where I was like, well, why did you do that? I think the real problem the show has is not that it changes stuff from the book, is that, as you said, in doing so, I think it sucks a lot of what makes this story so great. And it changes things in a way that just kind of hurt the overall arc of the story.
Yeah.
And there's some changes that I think make sense, like logically and rationally, if you look at it. Like, I want to talk to you for a while about the changes to Bill and the choice to basically make Bill a major player in the story. And like, that is one of the ones that I think, if you look at it like from a structural, how do we tell the story in a different medium standpoint, it might make sense why they did it that way. And then there's other changes where I'm like, I don't understand any of this. I think there's a real problem with the dialogue in the show, like a real problem with the dialogue in the show, where it goes from being laughably bad to just innocently clumsy uh, through a lot of the most important sequences of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I am 100% with you that I think the final episode is the best. It accomplishes kind of everything that you would want an adaptation of this thing to accomplish, and it certainly does stick the landing. You know, we talked glowingly about the epilogue of the book and how much we loved it. I really do think this captures the magic and the beauty and the tragedy of that epilogue very, very well. I think part of that is the actress who plays Sadie Dunhill, as a woman named Sarah Gadon, and she does a really, really good job. She is one of my favorite actors in this thing, for sure. I think her and the Lee Harvey Oswald actor Daniel Weber were definitely like my favorite performers on the show, for sure.
Yeah, this may sound weird, but I sort of kept forgetting that this isn't like actually Lee Harvey Oswald. You know, it's a stupid thing to say, but like, if you showed me a picture of Lee Harvey Oswald, I feel like a part of me would be like, oh, right, he's not literally that man who was on the TV show.
Yeah, there's a moment in the end of I think maybe in the last episode, where he's like flipping through stuff, or no, it's like when he's trying to decide what he wants to do, and it's like there's flashes of memories shooting through his head. It's when he's remembering that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. And there's one when we flash to the police mugshot of Lee Harvey Oswald, and like there was I had to look up the Oswald mugshot, because I was like, did they just use the real Lee Harvey Oswald mugshot? That would be a weird choice. And no, they didn't. They made one of this actor, but he does look so close to Oswald that it really worked, for sure.
You know what's funny is I thought you were going to end that sentence in a totally different way, because I remember the flash and I was like, oh, that's cute. They used a real picture of Lee Harvey Oswald and it's like, no, it's the actor. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to take a couple of your points from a second ago. Number one, on the script, like it's funny because you and I swear all the time, obviously, too much, some have said. And so I clearly have no problem with profanity, and I watch movies with profanity all the time. There was just like a laziness to it in this show, where it's like everything is just fuck is thrown into the script. Like,
yeah,
how are they going to know that the situation is serious if the characters don't say fuck in this scene? In like every line, it would be like everybody, like back and forth, characters would be saying a sentence. What the fuck? Oh, fuck. And I'm just like, okay, like that's it devalues it, and it doesn't feel like anything anymore. And then and then you start noticing it. And then once I started noticing that they were overusing it, I just kept noticing it constantly. And then it really bothered me past that point.
That's so funny, because I mean, I didn't have that exact reaction that you had, but there were a couple times when Franco works a fuck into the sentence, and it felt jarring to me in a way that is like, people in this time period didn't say fuck as much.
Right.
And you just like saying it casually feels a little weird, and it's kind of weird that no one's really commenting on that. That's the thing I thought of in that one moment. But now that you're saying that, like, I think that was part of a long feeling that I hadn't fully realized until this moment.
Yeah. So there's that, and then you mentioned, I think we both basically mentioned like they cut out a lot of the sweetness and so forth. I was just thinking about the scene where uh, uh, his boss, the principal, is going
Deak.
to fire him. Yeah, Deak, absolutely, Deak. Deak is going to fire him, or does fire him actually, or begins to fire him, I suppose. And and Jake is like, "You can't fire me. Think of all the good. Think of like all the amazing things I've done. I got all those football players to act, and I
Yeah.
and I arranged that benefit for and he's just like listing things that didn't happen in the show, and you're like, what? this
Yeah, we didn't bother to include any of that great stuff in the show. Yeah, great job. I
these were
love
all
that.
these were all the things where Jake actually shows himself to have a really big heart and be a good
Yeah.
person, and like also like smile and be kind of a happy person for a while, because we only
Yeah.
see him being miserable. That was what I said at the top of the episode.
Yeah. So Jake Epping, I think Jake Epping is a great place to really start to dive into the details of this thing here, Matt. James Franco. Uh, I like James Franco as a performer. Um, Usually, I also think James Franco has a very specific lane to him, or maybe two specific lanes. One of those lanes is kind of the goofy idiot stoner character from like Freaks and Geeks, and I think he played it in Pineapple Express as well, where he's just kind of playing a moron idiot. I think his Harry Oswald character in Spider-Man is kind of that as well, right? He's just kind of stupid, and
Mm-hmm.
he plays dumb very, very well. I think he's miscast in this show. I really, really, really do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you already talked about just a thing you've on our other show dubbed face acting. Well, the problem with James Franco is he does do face acting. It's the one face. He's
Uh-huh.
got just that one face, and it means all the emotions and things. And what happens is you have these moments where um, you just like you need to understand what Jake is thinking in these moments, and
Mm-hmm.
the movie or the show does not let you in on those moments. And I think that's really, really damaging because the changes that this thing does make Jake seem one part complete idiot, and I think part of that is that's Franco's lane, and when he like falls into that complete idiot stupid guy lane is when he's singing the most. And I wonder if like the show just kind of inadvertently leaned into that because he was so good at it. But the other half of this coin is incredibly cruel and
Mm-hmm.
terrible. Like you talked so much in the book about how like just a good guy Jake Epping is. We like this good guy. And it's not that he wasn't frustrating and made mistakes and we called him out for those mistakes, but like his mistakes in the book were like, hey, maybe you were like a little mean to that lady
Mm-hmm.
that probably deserved it a little bit, but you were a little harsh on her. In the show, the mistakes that Jake Epping makes are gaslighting his longtime partner, locking him in a mental institution, and then leaving him, which caused him to get electroshock therapy, convince himself that he was crazy, and then jump out of a window and die. And that's all your fault, Jake Epping. That literally you did all of that. And the
Mm-hmm.
show doesn't seem to want to like reckon with that fact at all. I was mortified. I was absolutely
Yeah.
mortified.
I thought it was really interesting because part of me really likes the changes surrounding Bill. Like, I think a lot of them are functional
Yeah.
because otherwise you're just watching Jake wander around doing things alone, which is
Yeah.
even
Mhm.
more slow and boring than the show already is, which is kind of slow and boring.
Yeah,
But
that was what I was kind of teeing up earlier. Was
Mhm.
I think the decision to include Bill does solve a problem, which is that so much of the action of this show would just be James Franco wandering around by himself, and James Franco, bless his dumb little heart, is not a skilled enough performer to do that in a way that makes it super interesting.
Mhm.
So yeah, we have to solve this problem. Let's bring another character in there so at least he can play off of and bounce off of and do all these things. Yeah. It is a completely rational decision. I think it's interesting. But then but then we have a problem of we have Bill and we have to get rid of Bill. And how do we get rid of Bill?
Yeah.
In this incredibly cruel way.
Right. Incredibly cruel. I mean, I kind of love it for how batshit it is, but it's so jarringly not a fit for this story and the tone that this story has been taking. Like, I think, you said a minute ago that adaptational changes are that you just have to play along. You have to play along with what the show is going to do. Maybe the show is doing something different. And I still don't necessarily like this either, but I was thinking very often while watching it, like, this is much more of like almost a mean-spirited comedy at Jake Epping's expense, where like suddenly the choice of Franco becomes sort of like appropriate in a perverse way, because it's like, well, it's much like Harry Osborn is this angry idiot who you're kind of happy to watch to watch bad things happen to him. That's almost the mindset that you fall into, because you're like, oh Jesus, not again. Jake, come on, man. as he stumbles into like, so like, for example, in the book, we kind of gently rib Jake for not being super deft about his gambling. But it's so much more overtly a comedy scene in the show, where he just lacks any sense of guile and understanding of the risk he's putting himself into. And like the scene where he follows Mornchild into the restaurant, and it's a comedy scene, right? Like it's ridiculous. And I was like, is that what we're doing? Like it's just funny. It's like a fish out of water comedy, and we're laughing at how dumb he is and how bad he is at this. And it's like, no, because it's not actually funny. It's not. But you are continually just like yelling at the screen. Yeah. So
I mean, Franco plays it like it is supposed to be a comedy, but the rest of the show doesn't. I really think you're onto something here. Is because he's falling into that lane of kind of doofus that he's playing it. Yeah, because we kind of chastise Jake in the book for being not an idiot, but certainly like, man, for someone who spent the last 5 years planning for this thing, you sure didn't do any planning. And like, he is a mastermind compared to the Jake we see in the show, who did nothing, who did absolutely nothing, who had no plan for anything. Like we talked about how the cool parts of the actual day in question were like how much he kind of hedged his bets and had like alternate plans for everything. And it was kind of cool seeing all that play out and him need all that as the day wore on. And in the show, it's just nothing. He had no plans. He had nothing. He's just kind of bumbling his way through. My favorite line in this whole thing, Matt, was they're running around looking for cars, and there's an 80-yard. There's a whole bunch of 80-yard lines in the show, by the way, like a whole bunch. For those that don't know, that stands for automated dialogue replacement. It's basically when you record lines after the fact that weren't said at the time of filming, because maybe a test audience looked at it, or a producer or studio looked at it and said, this doesn't make any sense. The lines here are, Sadie says with her back to the camera something to the effect of like, my dad kept his keys in the like the mirror fold thing in the car, which is like the visor, which is a completely unnecessary thing to say, because everyone watching the television show knows if you're trying to find the keys to a car, the first place you look is the visor, even though I don't know if anyone's ever actually kept their keys there in the history of cars, but that's just the movie. That's just the movie thing. And then it moves from there to Jake bending over and saying, get in, I'll hotwire it. Bill taught me how, which is the line said with his back to the camera, and like definitely did not say in the moment. Like it's definitely like a, wait a minute, how does he know how to hotwire a car? Oh, Bill taught him. There we go. Problem solved. And that's like, it's just, he's an idiot. He's an idiot, man. It's so clumsy.
Yeah. But yet again, not so far that you can laugh at it.
No, that's the problem for sure.
There's a real unevenness too. Like I also was thinking, especially toward the end when I really enjoyed the last episode, I was like, I bet you could make a good show out of this show if you just like cut out like, so there's 8 episodes. I bet if you cut out 3 or 4 of them, you could get an okay adaptation out of this, because like there was some stuff, like for whatever reason, I don't even know if I could put my finger on it, but I thought all of the scenes with Al were like the worst things in the world from like an
Yes.
acting point of view, and like conveying like what's going on with these characters, like this is sort of the spine of the show, and we keep
Yeah.
flashing back to it, and it's always like jarring and weird. Cut all that out.
Yeah. I think part of that is Chris Cooper, who is an actor that I love deeply.
Mhm.
I think he's an excellent actor. Like he's in Adaptation, one of my favorite films of all time, and he's wonderful in it. He's awful in this. Like I don't know
Mhm.
what I don't know if it's like that the fact that he's trying to sound sick and dying that's messing with his performance, but every line read that he gives falls flat to me.
Yeah.
Every single one.
It's one of the few times where I'm like, does he not know his lines? Like, is this a thing where he was like line and then he's just like repeating it back rotely? Because it really, like, that's the level on which it's like the intonation doesn't even match the way that a human being would say this. It's not even like, oh, I didn't buy that. It's like, oh, I would do a better job than that, and I have no talent here whatsoever. And you know, the other stuff that I do like though is like I like the Harry Dunning stuff. They made some interesting changes there. I don't necessarily like all of it, but I thought it was riveting actually. Like I was like into it. Like it's like, wow, this is you know, but what I mean specifically is saving Harry from his horrible father. Some of it I like, some of it I don't, but like there's some good stuff in there, and there's some good stuff with Oswald, especially at the end. And there's just kind of a lot of like treading water in the middle. The middle was very boring, the middle episodes.
Yeah, it is kind of remarkable how little happens in the course of the story, right? Like, is they hit most of the events of the book, even in different ways. But like thinking back on it and looking back and be like, how nothing did anything happen in the middle of this? Like, it feels like we're just doing nothing. Like there's one or two scenes with Sadie, I think, that are really, really well done. Like I'll say this: I genuinely, when James Franco just gets to be Jake Epping, man in love with Sadie Dunhill, like that is, he's a charming guy, he's a charming actor, and that stuff works on me. Like I actually believe their love story. It's just kind of everything else around it. It doesn't work on me as well. So those moments in the show, I really enjoyed those moments, and that's why I think I liked that final episode so much, because Sadie is so intimately involved in everything that's happening there, and I got a little choked up when she died, despite the fact that I knew it was going to happen, and had emotionally prepared for it by reading the book several times in the past few months. But that stuff all works for me for sure.
I got choked up there, and the part when I really got choked up, where I was almost like, it was really a moment where I was like, okay, I've been too hard on Franco, and I've been too hard on the show, and it was just like one moment where, you know, he goes back to the future, sees that it's a hellhole, and then goes back to the past, and he sees Sadie drive by, which in that exact moment, I was like, oh, come on, that's like too much of a coincidence, but then I pretty quickly was like, no, this is actually just efficient. Let's just get it over with. And then he meets her, and the moment when he's like holding her hand, and you see, to talk about face acting, this is like the one moment of really good face acting. You see in his face as he makes the decision to let her go, and
see,
I like that.
Yeah, I don't see that in his face. I see that in his hands. Some good hand acting.
That was
like slowly and gingerly lets the hands go.
That was honestly the best hand acting I've ever seen. George Costanza would be jealous.
No, I agree with you though. Like I rolled my eyes at the moment in the show where she says, "Oh, I was just up in Lisbon, Maine in 1960." Like, oh, we must have just missed each other. I rolled my eyes at that. And then I think at that moment I remembered that he does see her up there, and like I was like, oh, that's stupid. And you're absolutely right. As it plays out in real time in that scene, it's like, yeah, this is dumb. But then you quickly go, oh no, you're absolutely right. This is just for the efficiency of storytelling. It's like do we want to have to do this long thing of him traveling back to Dallas? And I mean, they kind of had it set up like he could have bumped into her like while she was on the bench reading the first time he met her in the first episode. Like they could have done that. It's just easier. It's just easier for her to be right there, and then we don't have to in our head think about, oh, so he drove all the way down to Dallas and then let her go and then drove all the way back up. We don't need to do all that. So it's just happening right there. I think does ultimately work.
Way better for television, especially.
But
so I just want to get this out of the way because it's on my mind, but that reminds me of the whole like yellow card man thing where I kind of, I already complained in the book that I didn't really like the way that we treated like the nature of time travel. I thought it would have been cleaner if it were just like, no, like the reason you should not mess with the past is that you aren't sure of the effect that it's having. It's not any of this other mumbo jumbo. And then they somehow made like a different stupid mistake in the show where it's like, no matter what you do, she'll always die. And it's like, no, that like, we don't need to do that. Like, like just acknowledge. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's so interesting that they cut out the part we didn't like, which was that like this isn't a bad effect because of some weird like string time travel continuity thing. It was just literally what we said is like, oh, Kennedy surviving actually just resulted in a bunch of bad things happening. But then at the same time, I thought it was there's part of me that was really interested in the yellow card man stuff. So like, first of all, I think the choice to take something that the book said and visualize it, which is that the yellow card man is a personification of the obdurate past, I thought was a clever thing to do, to make him kind of like just teleport around and show up at various moments. Like he shows up in Sadie's house when she in Jake's house when Sadie discovers the tape, like that he's just kind of teleporting around, tinkering with things and being that visualization of the obdurate past. I like that. I think it's effective. He basically serves that function in the book, but we have to make it visual, so let's just put him in there. But then there's part of me that's glad we didn't go into like, oh, I'm like a watcher that's like watching the timeline. Like they didn't really go into any of that stuff. They just made him this kind of crazy guy that's been obsessively trying to fix his bad event and is just there to warn Jake that it's impossible. My problem with it, Matt, is that I don't buy that Jake would just take his word for it on the first try, right? It's like the woman you loved dies. And then some guy says like, no matter what you do, she'll just die every time. No matter what you do, you don't understand. She'll die every time. I wouldn't just be like, oh, bummer. Right. Okay, I give up. Like there's not enough work to be done in this in the final moments to make me buy that he would just say like, yeah, I gotta let you go. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I feel crazy now because it seems obvious to me that the way you do that is, okay. So the book and show both feel like they have to explain why he doesn't go back and get Sadie. The book does it by saying that he'll destroy the time stream and the tower will fall. The show does it by saying, oh, you can't save her, which there's like you said, no evidence of that, no reason he should believe that. But I'm just like, we talked about this previously, but I'm just like, he needs to realize that that's like not Sadie. That's like, this is Sadie 2.0 that has none of the memories, and he's a different person now, and it won't be the same relationship, and it'll be weird and forced, and like the Groundhog Day thing. I'm repeating myself, but I'm like, it's really easy. It's not, you don't need to do this weird thing. Like you just need to have a scene where you could have the same scene where he meets her, and like and maybe he just sees like, oh, this is clearly like a much younger person. And just a different person than I fell in love with. Yeah. And I'm a different person. And this is, and as much as I love her, the Sadie that I love is dead. This is a different person. And I think you could do that. And it just drives me crazy.
No, I mean, I think that scene, I think maybe ultimately what they might have thought in that moment is like, it would be too cruel. But like, there's a part of me that thinks, oh, in this scene, he's going to walk up to her like a fucking crazy person and just be like, I know you, and start and she's just going to be weirded out and made uncomfortable. And she's just going to be like, get away from me, strange man. And that will be part of what helps him cue into that. But instead we do this thing where she's obviously like has this, which I think is romantic, and I like that the epilogue of the book does it, that there is this kind of unspoken attraction between the two of them, that she feels it even though she doesn't know him or remember him or any of that stuff. Like, I like that. It's functional in the epilogue. But yeah, I mean, I think if we're gonna make him make this decision based off of something that's nebulous and unclear, that seems like a better move.
I'm just venting yet again, because they had an opportunity to fix my biggest complaint, and then they fixed it and then did it wrong in a different way. So.
Yeah. But I think it's also like, you know, we talked about the whole Bill suicide and how it's all on Jake thing. I do think it's really interesting how this show like morphs stuff around to make Jake a much more active participant in all the bad things that happen. Like, one thing that stood out to me was, you know, the way we saw the obdurate past like function in the book was that it would kind of just like bad shit would happen. And it's like, oh, in the show, it really seems like they wanted to lean into like the creepiness of it. Like, the thing I can't stop thinking about is he's in the phone booth trying to make a call, and then like suddenly a car drives through the phone booth, and there's a woman in the car, right? And she, as she's dying, says to him, "You're not supposed to be here." And it's like, oh, so his actions have now killed an innocent person, like definitively, right? Like, that is something I don't think we ever directly saw in the book, was that when the past was working against him, other people were not just being hurt, but like killed. And to show us that is like, again, it makes you feel a little bit icky about Jake.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, totally agree. He seems to not really have remorse for the horrible things that he does. We already mentioned the thing with Bill where he jumps out the window and he's like, oh, it sucks.
He also is textually responsible for Sadie's face getting cut up.
Right.
Like, it's not like a nebulous of like, did my interaction in this timeline cause Sadie to get injured? It's like the guy that did it says, I did this because you said this thing. And it's like, oh, okay, that's certainly a change. Can we talk about Johnny Clayton?
Sure.
And this the whole Johnny Clayton thing. So first of all, I think it's an interesting move to cast as this incredibly frightening, terrifying, crazy person, the kind of dorky doctor from Grey's Anatomy as John Clayton, which is what they did here. I was like, that's John Clayton? Like, that was not in my head of who John Clayton is. But that's fine, whatever. And then they this is one of those changes that I'm like, okay, I guess I see it. I think it's because like getting someone in a visual medium to understand what a broom in the bed means was like just too far to go in this 8-episode series. So what they just made him kind of a little sex freak, actually. They just kind of, like the clothespin on the dick, and like they because in the book they had never had sex. Not true in the show, right? Not true at all. I guess like that kind of stuff makes sense for like timing, but then again, he deals with Johnny in the stupidest way possible. Like, he's just like, oh yeah, and Sadie told me about your clothespin. Like, Jake, what are you doing? What the fuck? Like, he thinks this is one of those moments that you talked about where I'm like, is the show wanting me to be like this fucking idiot? Because like he had given up. Like, he was going to give up and just leave. And then you said this stuff, and it's like, okay, whatever. Yeah.
I was actually doing work to try to make that fit in with the character of Jake, because I was like, well, we do have these scenes where he gets really mad doesn't happen often. It happens more toward the end of the book, where he gets really mad and like yells at people and gets really angry. And and I think there was something interesting happening in the book there that I think we touched on, that like he's not even aware of Jake sort of lacks introspection in some ways in the books. And maybe he's not even aware of how like stressed and sort of morally injured by this crusade that he's become, because even in the book he kind of becomes a worse person as the book goes on. But in the show, it's not like there's a progression to it. It's like he just is this way, and he'll like scream at people. And I mean, like the way he treats Bill, setting aside having him involuntarily committed and leading to his death, he just treats Bill like shit constantly. He belittles him and bullies him and orders him around.
Makes him do his grunt work while he's off living in happiness and Jody. Yeah,
exactly. I just totally agree that he just comes out of it looking like something between an idiot and just kind of a callous jerk, basically.
Yeah,
and
and it'd be one thing if the show was reckoning with that, right? And it feels like the show is aware that he's mean to Bill. I think the whole Bill Marina subplot, which just like breaks the entire time travel stuff so much that they just directly interact with Oswald and Marina constantly, like breaks how time travel would work. And our whole House of Cards thing is just like forever destroyed because of that. Which there was this moment that I thought they were going to do the thing we had talked about in the overview episode, where Jake looks at Bill as Bill is like chumming up with Lee Harvey Oswald and like whispers to himself, "Second shooter." And I'm like, are we really going to do this? Is this really where we're going to go? That there was a second shooter and it was the guy that you brought to Dallas? Of course not, because that would break all the other parts of the story, so we couldn't actually do that. But it does acknowledge that, like with Bill's kind of thing with Marina, is that Jake is neglecting him as a partner and a friend, but it doesn't do anything with that dramatically, right? It doesn't like Jake doesn't learn a lesson from that and change his behavior or do anything different. In fact, he doubles down on that by doing the worst possible thing, which is having a man committed when he's not crazy. And then like, I don't know about you, like the second I saw that, I was like, oh, the worst possible place to be in the 60s is a mental institution. This is a bad call, Jake. And everything happens exactly the way you think it would with that. It's horrible and tragic. And it's like, it's like nothing learned, nothing gained. It's just a thing that happened. And you're like, oh, now I like my main character less. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was kind of intrigued by the idea of like second shooter, where like part of me was like, that's kind of corny and totally clashes with the story that we're adapting. But also I was like, sure, fine. That's interesting. Let's really open this up to some other possibilities. I've always kind of been tickled by the idea of like, well, maybe his intervention is what caused the JFK assassination. Maybe you gave Oswald the idea, like that would have been a totally different story, obviously. But like that's one version of the story of that you could have done with this book, is like, actually it was your actions that led to this, and it's your fault for meddling, self-consistent time loop type time travel. Obviously, you're right. We didn't do that. But we just throw the whole idea of butterfly effect out the window because they do all sorts of meddling. It doesn't matter.
It is certainly true that the show courts the conspiracy theory stuff a lot closer than the book did, right? Like, there's multiple scenes with the CIA and the show is basically stating explicitly that like Morenchild was a CIA operative and he did try to recruit Oswald at some point. And then it just kind of tosses that all out the window at the end and says like, no, actually that they kind of threw all that in the garbage and decided not to do any of that. And then Oswald acted on his own, which is a little too like neat and pretty. If you're going to like court that level of conspiracy stuff, you can't just like then in the 11th hour, in my opinion, just go, nah, it wasn't that actually. It was none of that. That was all just a misunderstanding.
Yeah, I thought that was such an interesting choice. It was like Jake was convinced for almost the entire duration of the show that it was the CIA. And and I was kind of thinking like, how are we meant to take this basically? Because I was thinking, okay, I have book knowledge. I know if we're adapting the book, it's probably going to not turn out to have been the CIA. Also, that would,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the show would be way more controversial if it was like, yeah, the show actually depicts the CIA as having killed Kennedy. Um, but yeah, he thinks it almost the entire show, and then only changes his mind at the end. And I guess what I mean by that is like, so as a show watcher, are you supposed to be going along with him, or are you supposed to be like, no, that's not, he's wrong? Because the reason I fixate on this is that like this is one of the ways in which the show makes him seem stupider to me.
Yeah.
But this is, in this particular instance, it's because I know that he's wrong. Whereas maybe just a normal show watcher who hasn't read the book doesn't know that, and so it seems more reasonable.
I don't know. I think part of it is the way Franco plays it with his like, like how many times does he say CIA? And it's like, it just seems a little goofy coming from Franco when he says that. It seems a little crazy. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe this is coming from us kind of knowing that that's not actually the way it's going to go down. But it does read as a little goofy and ridiculous. I mean, the other part of it is, once again, his complete lack of ability to plan or execute on plans. Like, we talked how much we like the scene in the book where Jake poses as a CIA agent and makes contact with Morgenstern and has this like really, really like smart, savvy like threat scene. And then in the show, it's just him sneaking up behind him and strangling him and then like forcing him to admit it. And in the show, like that is the moment that gets him to basically say, okay, yeah, Oswald acted alone. Like he just having a garrote on Morgenstern's neck and having him say, I don't know what you're talking about. That's enough. I'm good now. We can go. Which felt a little weird to me.
Yeah, that was one of the many things that makes Jake look like a dumb, violent jerk. Because again, at the expense of what the book does, where it does give him moments of being cool, right? Like he's not a total badass. He's handling it like a normal human being, where it's like, okay, things don't go right. You make mistakes. He does make mistakes, but also he has his moments where kind of things come together, and that was one of the great ones. And yeah, it's just him violent. It reminds me of the scene where in Batman Begins, where Batman has the guy on the roof and drops him off the roof, and he's like screaming at him. It's like there's no nuance, there's no cleverness here. He's just a thug.
Yeah.
A time traveler with every advantage on his side, reduced to screaming at a man to tell him something that is actually incorrect.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're so right. Yeah, it's all weird, and what it does, Matt, is I think what the show kind of sort of tries to do at the same time is answer the question of why did Lee Harvey Oswald do it? Which it ultimately concludes is basically an impossible question to answer. And it's kind of, I don't want to get into, current events too much, but like we had a big attempted assassination happen last weekend in our country. And I couldn't help but think about this while I was reading the news, because we were reading this book, and the way the narratives around the would-be assassin are developing when we don't know anything about him just reminded me a lot of like the way people talked about Lee Harvey Oswald in the aftermath of the Kennedy shooting, which is like, who is this guy? Why would he do this? And the big questions around is like, why would this kid who, tried to assassinate a conservative general 6 months prior suddenly decide he's going to kill the Democratic liberal president? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. I thought that the way that the show attempted to at least gesture towards an answer was pretty lame, actually, which is that his mommy tells him he has a lot of potential. And then if you didn't pick up on it there, Matt, in the book depository, after he misses the shot and he's having the standoff with Franco, Lee Harvey Oswald yells, I have a lot of potential. which I just thought was like a little lame and shallow. Like, obviously this is a human being. Human beings are incredibly complicated. Like, the reason why this man decided to do this thing and change the world is complex and nuanced. And I thought the book did a pretty good job of painting that picture for us, that it is a combination of his upbringing and his mother, which I don't know. Did you get the vibe from the show? Like, the mom is in the book is kind of crazy and awful and evil, and I just never got that vibe from the character in the show.
No, I don't think they even tried. I think she came off as like mothering and reasonable and not the clear villainous presence that she was in the book. In the book, it's almost like, this is why he's this way. Which I have no idea if that's actually true or not, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, right? Like, it's just this series of like him really, really wanting to be an important person who was like good at these things and just not being able to be that. Like, I think the greatest irony of it is perhaps that Lee Harvey Oswald maybe just didn't actually have a lot of potential. Maybe he was just kind of not very good at anything. And in that moment, in that frustration of or that fear of knowing that, he decides to do something. I just thought, like, I don't know, and I'm not even saying the show is like wrong in that depiction. It's just like it felt too like pat and neat for me to have him in that moment say, I have potential.
Yeah,
I can do anything.
Yeah, it was way too,
do something.
Like, just imagine, like, the pieces were already there. They just had to cut some things out, and it would have been great. Actually, so it's been a few days since I saw it, but like, there's a sequence of events where I was like, if you had just shown that would have been great, because it's basically like a series of things going wrong in his life, and you're seeing like this is a guy who it's dawning on him that he's not going to get his wife back, he's not going to get his family back, he's going to work shit jobs for the rest of his life, and he's going to be disrespected. And then he's sitting on this bench after having gone through these experiences where he's just like silently seething and inwardly, and he sees the newspaper that's like JFK will be on a motorcade through the city, and then he just gets up and walks away, and we watch him walk away from the bench. I'm pretty sure, like, what I just described was sort of in the show. It was just also cheek by jowl with those other things you mentioned, which like oversell it and like make it too literal, and then it becomes boring.
I agree. I completely agree. I will say one thing that I do like that the show does, speaking of Oswald, is the book is understandably and necessarily locked in on Jake's perspective the entire time, right? Jake is the first person narrative. We cannot leave Jake's perspective. The show is not held by that standard. And so one thing we get to do that I did appreciate is we got to cut over and hang out with Lee Harvey Oswald the morning of, right? We got to see him wake up. We got to see him pick up the rifle, walk out of the door, get to work. We got to see him kind of meticulously set up the sniper's nest on the 6th floor. Like, these are all like quiet moments of kind of just building up to things that I really, really appreciated. And it's like that, it was one of those moments where I was watching the show where I was like, oh, this is why you make an adaptation of this, is because you can do this differently. You can show it from a different angle, a different perspective. And I really liked all those moments. I really did.
Yeah. Again, like, last 2 episodes were pretty solid. I thought that episode 7 was Soldier Boy. I think I remember mostly liking that. That's the one where Bill jumps out the window, which it's like, again, setting aside the fact that it's just like a tonal punch in the face, you're kind of like, okay, that was not, sorry for the cliche, but that was a choice. Like, I appreciate you being willing to go there. And then number 8, I thought was just like in its entirety a pretty solid episode. Don't really have any complaints about the ending, other than the thing I already said about the yellow card man, which is, whatever.
Yeah, so I have some complaints. So, okay, I thought that the confrontation between Lee and Jake on the 6th floor made sense for a television show, right? Like, I don't think they could have just done it the way it was done in the book, where it's like he calls out his name and then it's over. Like it makes sense that we're building up to this final moment between these two characters at the end of the show, and we have to give them like a 5-minute confrontation at the end where they're kind of hunting each other in the sixth floor museum, which, by the way, was filmed in the actual book depository.
Wow.
It was filmed there. I know this for a fact because if you look out one of the windows, you see Reunion Tower, which is like it's a rotating ball restaurant in Dallas. That wasn't built till the 70s, so I know for a fact it was filmed there, because if it wasn't and they just added it in for some reason, even though it was not the right time. So yeah, I mean, they filmed in Texas. They filmed Dealey Plaza itself. That is real. And then they filmed in the book depository. Those are the two places. Everything else, by the way, clearly not in Texas, like Canada, 100%. Like when Jake's like crawling through trees and there's like pine trees all around, I'm like, this is not Texas. This is not Texas at all. Not a huge deal, but definitely noticed it. Anyway, I thought that final confrontation on on the sixth floor was like really good. I appreciated it. I thought it was fun. I do think the way everything plays out, though, it really strains the credulity for how he could be let go. Like we already had a problem with the way things laid out in the book, or I should say I had a problem with believing that the FBI and the government would just let him go a day later with how the events played out in the book. In the show, he is the one that shoots Oswald with the rifle that shot Kennedy. And it's just like that is adding another layer of complication onto this thing that the book didn't have to deal with, because in the book, the Oswald was shot by the Secret Service from the ground. They saw him up in the window and they shot up in the window and they killed him. So when you ask, oh, who was the one that took the shot against Kennedy? They could say, oh, it was that guy because he was in the sniper's nest and I shot him. But now Jake is holding the rifle. And so it's like, it becomes a lot less believable in my mind that he was able to straighten out this story the way it played out in the show.
Yeah, he would definitely be a suspect. I totally agree, actually. I mean, unfortunately agree, because I was just saying that I thought the last episode was really solid. But yeah, it's like basically they have every reason in the world to charge him. And then there can be a trial, right? In the trial, you can show the evidence of, okay, it was clearly Oswald's rifle. Oswald bought the rifle. There's the picture of Oswald with the rifle. Like, you could have proven that it wasn't Jake, but no, it would not just be like, let's just let bygones be bygones. I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah.
They have every reason to charge him. And then it's just like suddenly Kennedy calls him to thank him. And then you're absolutely right. Within the context of the show, you're like, why would Kennedy call him to thank him? Kennedy would also think that this guy he's one of the guys up in the room where the shot came from. And this was the guy holding the rifle. Why would Kennedy call you? Yeah. And then, by the way, it doesn't absolve you of crimes if the president calls you. So, yeah, it did bother me, actually. And
yeah, ultimately it didn't ruin the episode for me. Like, I agree with you. I still think that's the strongest episode in the series, is that final one. But yeah, it did it did bug me just a little bit. I was like, this was a cool sequence. I like how it played out this way. But first of all, there's no way it takes the police 5 minutes to get up to the sixth floor of that museum. Like, if or I keep calling it a museum because it's a museum now. There's no way they get up to the sixth floor of the book depository 5 minutes later. Like, shots at the Kennedy vehicle from the sixth floor, they're up there in 30 seconds. They're pounding down the door, which was the other thing that the show did that I thought was interesting is, we have this door that Jake has to force open that is kind of like a representation of the past trying to stop him from stopping Oswald. And then after he successfully stops the assassination, we very distinctly see the door on its own accord shut, which was I think the show's like excuse for why no one was rushing up, is because the past was holding the door shut. But that's interesting, right? Because he's already changed the past at that point. So it's just the past being an asshole at this point.
Yeah, which is not something we've seen before, and not something from the book. I guess that particular moment, I guess, like you said a second ago, I saw that as being one of the choices that you make for TV, where it's like, okay, look, we've been building up to this for 8 episodes. You want an action scene. You got to have an action scene. the way it resolves in the book is very Stephen King, really, because King, not that he never does spectacle, but he also kind of loves his anticlimax, particularly concerning like the big bad villain who you've been afraid of for the whole book. It's like they usually go out with a whimper, and that's basically what happened in the book.
True. Yeah.
See why they changed it, but yeah, it was just, I don't know. Yeah, I you're pointing out all of the weak points in the final episode after I said it was great, but I did feel like the whole sort of gunfight in the room was just like Oswald would not have like stalked around between the stacks like that. I don't know, whatever. This is the kind of thing where
it's TV. It's just TV.
Yeah, what I feel happening is the thing where you start nitpicking because the thing isn't working on you, right? Which is exactly what I was feeling there. Also, I think in some ways, I think this is worth saying, and we don't talk about this often because it would get repetitive, honestly. But like we talk about a lot of adaptations, and the thing about adaptations is it's impossible to watch them the way they're sort of intended to be watched. Like that scene just is always going to play totally differently to you and I, because we read the book and we know the strokes of how it ends. We know that Sadie's going to be shot. We know that Oswald is going to die. We know that Jake is going to be arrested. And so a lot of the tension is totally robbed from us watching it. And we don't exactly know, okay, they've clearly changed it. We don't exactly know how things are going to evolve, but we know the broad strokes. So like, I just mentioned this to say for myself, really, like I shouldn't be so quick to say like, oh, it was boring and stupid that they changed it. It's like, no, you say that you say you were bored because you knew how it would end, but that's not necessarily how some other person was going to react.
Yeah, I mean, I really wonder if that's just the difference between my first watch and this one is just intimate knowledge of the source material robbing it of any kind of narrative tension. And I mean, in my opinion, a good show will grab you and foist that narrative tension on you, even if you have read the source material. And like that, I liked many seasons of Game of Thrones, right? I had read every single one of those books, and I appreciated them, and I felt there was sufficient narrative tension when there should be, because that was a very well done show. So yeah, it's not like an excuse to say the reason we didn't like this as much is because we had just read the book, but I mean, it's certainly something that is indicative of what the overarching problems are, for sure.
Yeah, fair.
We haven't talked about Miss Mimi very much. Obviously, a big change from book to screen is that Miss Mimi is around much more often, and she's also a Black woman in this adaptation. I think honestly, when I told you that I remembered Miss Mimi like being around more in this book, it was probably because I was remembering the show, because she's such a brief presence in the story of the book, even though she leaves a big impact. I liked her character in this show, Matt. I think like the choice to make her a Black woman, I think, is really interesting and allows you like an avenue to really shine a light on the racism problems of the 60s. I thought sometimes she felt a little tokeny to me, that like that's her role in the story now, is just to be the Black woman that Jake can save. Didn't love that kind of stuff, but the way the relationship between her and Deak plays out, which was in the book also kind of a forbidden relationship because they weren't married. It wasn't because she was a Black woman. Now we have like a more textual reason for that, is because this also would have not been very societally accepted. I thought all that worked generally. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I thought one of the moments in the show that actually got me was when Jake is like brain damaged and I forget which way he either refers to Mimi as Deak's husband or
yeah, he's like, you're married to Miss Mimi or something.
You're married to Miss Mimi, yeah, and then Deak's reaction to that, because it's like what you said is true but not true, and in a way. I thought that was good. I thought she was good. The novel has all this really racial commentary sort of threaded through it in a way that's not super in your face, but it's all there. And for the adaptation to do that, I think it was a good choice to say, okay, we're going to keep this idea, but we're going to need to make it a little bit more explicit. And so we're going to have a central black character, which, I mean, there's just not a central black character in the book. Having it be Miss Mimi, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think one thing about it is like his scenes with her are actually one of the few times where he kind of gets to be like the sweet guy who, he stands up for her. He's a good person. Like that's practically the only time we just see him be like an uncomplicatedly good person without some kind of like hidden undertone to it, is when he's standing up for Miss Mimi.
Yeah. I will say the one scene that I loved so much in the book was the interview and the question about Catcher in the Rye. I loved that sequence so much in the book. And I feel like the adaptive change in the show completely robbed that scene of any of its like charm and like the good feeling of like him going, oh, I'm going to have to answer this question truthfully and it's going to screw me over for this job. And then the delightful surprise that Miss Mimi felt the same way. The way they've configured that in the book or in the TV show is Miss Mimi can't be the one giving the interview because she's has to just be an assistant in the show. She cannot be the librarian because she's black. And so she can't be the one giving the interview. And then so we have to have Deak give the interview. And like it, I don't know, maybe I'm reading into this, but it's pretty clear that like he doesn't actually like Catcher in the Rye and doesn't want the book in. But like I think the line is just like, he gave a good answer to your question, Miss Mimi. And like, that's supposed to be like, oh, she thinks this thing. I just felt like that robbed the scene of like the reason why it worked in the story.
Yeah, I see that. I basically agree that scene didn't land for me very, very successfully.
Yeah.
In the show. The other thing is like, his friendship with Deak in the book is much like his friendship with Mimi, where it's a thing that grows slowly and you really like it. You really buy it. It's one of his only real human friendships. And the show eventually gets there. But first we do the thing that I think at this point, I can just say this is a pet peeve of mine, where they sort of inject conflict into his relationship with Deak. I mean, there's subtext for it. It's not made up. But, Deak fires him and is super mad at him because Deak keeps like catching him. You went into he went to a brothel.
It's not a strip joint, it's a brothel.
A brothel, and then he like catches him in some other thing later, and it's like, I really liked you, Jake, and you're just this, and like it goes so far actually that you almost don't buy it when he comes back around to Jake's side, because it's like, why do you like Jake? Jake seems like an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, we really just kind of yada over like all the reasons why the people of Jody would really, really love Jake. Like the Mike character is really just kind of a bit part in this. We get like one sequence of him teaching, and it's just him like building a wall of books because he's reading the Cask of Amontillado, which is a really freaking awesome thing to do in class. Like we read Poe a lot in English class, and I was like, hell yeah, this rules. And so it's like a really great shortcut to show how he's the cool teacher that everyone likes, because he's making these straight-laced Texas 60s kid read Edgar Allan Poe. But we don't like see that on a personal level. Like the stuff with Mike Coleslaw is in there to endear you to Jake as a educator. Like that is what that is for, and to get you to understand that it's not just Sadie that he loves, and it's not just Sadie that loves him. It's Jody. It's the people of Jody. And I do think yadaing over so much of that stuff outside of Mimi and Deak robbed us of some of that. And you're absolutely right. Like I don't see Deak as the type of person that would just be his like constant companion and friend and would be like helping out with everything at the end of the book, because like, why would you like this guy? Yeah. he's a piece of shit, clearly, but based on your limited view of what he's been up to.
Right. It gives the impression that he's almost just doing it for Sadie, like because Sadie loves this man, not because he likes Jake. I think what you're meant to think is when Jake, basically saves Sadie from her knife-wielding maniac husband, that he has a change of heart
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, I just don't buy it, you know?
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't buy it that would do it.
Yeah. And I mean, Jake was also very kind to Miss Mimi, which is
Mhm.
something he like has to like hide that he knows about and loves, but of course probably does. So like, I think there's enough stuff in there to make you understand why Deke would help him. But yeah, I mean, like, I definitely, the companionship that we saw in the book, because Miss Mimi died so early, and because we got to see a lonely Deke kind of searching for what his life is going to be now, and how Jake kind of befriends him and they become very close. Like, that was a relationship that I really appreciated in the novel.
Mhm.
And to lose that, I think, kind of bumped me out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say. Simple as that. He was a source of a lot of joy in the book, and he's actually a source of a lot of conflict and angst in the show until
Yeah.
the last like 3 episodes or so, when it's like he suddenly snaps into being this supportive guy, and it's like, what this doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I also just want to say, the woman who plays Sadie is a very beautiful woman. And she gets this horrible scar on her face. And the show, I'm sorry, the scar just doesn't look that bad.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
in the book, like, it wasn't just that she had a scar on her face. It was that like nerves were cut and things were drooping, and like her face just didn't look right. And this is just like a very dainty, just a little red line down and like I can wear my hair in a way that will just completely cover it and you won't even freaking notice it. It's like,
Yeah.
I like, again, that's a TV move. I understand that, but also I was like, man, that just like, because the whole point in the show is that the reason why he like goes crazy with the gambling is to pay for the surgery, and that's what gets him in trouble. And it's like I don't know, man. Like, if I had that scar, I wouldn't be as broken up about it. Like, I certainly wouldn't want a scar down my face, but it's like orders of magnitude better than what she faced in the novel.
Well, and also it almost was a non-event. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and then she's gonna have to get a surgery, so it wasn't like a zero consequence. But then the surgery doesn't happen, and then it's almost like the story just forgets about it. The story just forgets about the fact. So maybe I just space, because it's entirely possible that you'll space when you're watching like 6 hours of TV at some point. But do they even pose the idea that she's going to come to the future with him to get her face fixed?
He invites her to come to the future with him, but it is not specifically to get her face fixed. The way the book, or the way the show positions it, is that this last surgery that he saves her from, because the Obdurate Past is going to murder Sadie for some reason, like, that surgery would have fixed the scar. Like, it's just like, her reaction to that is like, guess I'll just have this scar forever now. And I was like, wait a minute, the surgery was going to just fully fix the scar. So that is not the driving force behind inviting her to come back with him. That's just something he says, which, again, like, without that driving force, why don't you just stay in the 60s? Like, what about the present do you need to bring Sadie to? It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Nothing dramatic. I mean, that's the thing. I literally forgot that it was in there. I was like, wait, are they? Yeah. I remember a scene where I was like, are they? Oh, so she is going to the future with him. Why? Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, like, one of the things that I think they missed as well was Sadie's reaction to this incident, right? Like, Sadie in the book, like, goes into this really depressive state for a while. Right. That, it doesn't want to leave the house, isn't going to work, is horribly depressed about this whole thing. And it is Jake that kind of brings her back from the edge. And in the book, we like play lip service to it, in the fact that, like, Deke says something about like, oh, when are you going to get you back at school, Sadie? But that, like, we don't actually get to see her really emotionally deal with it on a level that I thought would have been satisfying for the character, because Sadie's she's a big character in this story, and she needs that. Like, we should see how this really emotionally affects her. Not just that it was John Clayton, not just that it was her former husband. We get to see those moments of the guilt and shame about that, but also like the horrifying damage to her face that she suffered. Like, we should see the emotional effect of that on her.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And okay, so this, I'm not saying that they should have put this in the adaptation because it would have been even longer and more circuitous. But there was the whole thing where, you know, her and Jake break up for a while, and she gets really freaked out about the idea of nuclear war with Russia. It's like a whole subplot, and it humanizes her, and it kind of shows her to be flawed in a believable human way.
Yeah.
And really, I think, you know, it establishes her a lot more firmly as just this 3-dimensional human being. And again, always have to hesitate when you say like the adaptation should have done this other thing that would have made it even slower and more boring, because I don't think it should have. But I think that's just one thing that I felt was missing, where Sadie is just like this beautiful, happy, like always happy, always supportive. Like there's like 5 seconds where she hears the Russian coming from the tape and is like, oh my God. And then it's fine. It's like immediately fine. And it makes her seem kind of like just slight and minor and inconsequential. And
yeah. I agree. I mean, I think the Russian tape scene was supposed to do what the, you know, tired of him lying, traveling to Vegas breakup. Like, I think it was like an accelerated version of that, but I ultimately think it's not as effective. And essentially, like, it it just kind of resolves itself too. Like, basically, she's horrified by what she hears because what she hears, for whatever reason, this is another thing that doesn't make sense to me, Matt. Why did he bring the tape of Lee and Marina fucking home to Jody with him? Why did he do that?
I don't know. The obdurate past.
I mean, maybe you could say the yellow card man brought it back for whatever. But then the events with John Clayton happen, and their disagreement, their argument, their misunderstanding essentially just resolves itself after that. And I don't know, I thought I really appreciated that the book took time to like resolve that independently, even if I thought like Sadie's choice to just say, I've decided I don't care about this stuff, was a little hard to believe at times, and seemed to be a recipe for destruction. Like, I like that we did that, and then the John Clayton stuff happened, and so it's like, oh, we finally got back together and everything's good, and then everything breaks apart. This just made it seem like the reason why that all was resolved was because of the traumatic experience. And then he tells her that he's from the future, like not long after that, right? I think it's like while she's in bed recovering that he's like, oh, by the way, I'm from the future.
That was so fun. That was one of the moments where I was like, I can't tell if this is supposed to be a comedy, because him telling her there is the stupidest, worst possible time to say this. Because like the first reaction is like, oh, you're crazy. I'm in this room with a crazy person. And it's just not how you should do that. If you're going to tell somebody you're from the future, don't do it when they're waking up from surgery and probably on, you know, painkillers.
I agree. Just a general rule for life is it'd be a good one. What did you think? I mean, we talked about Bill being, being presented as a character that's going to help him do all this stuff. I agree that functionally works, and I liked it. And I like George McKay, who played Bill. I thought he did a pretty good job. But like in the moment when this guy shows up with like your papers about Oswald, is like, what's going on here? And you're just like, look, man, I'm from the future. I'm here to save Kennedy. And he's just like, okay, I'm going to come with you and help you. And then Jake is just like, okay. Like in the moment, you're just like, dude, you fucking idiot. What are you talking about? You don't know this guy at all. You're just going to like trust him with this all important mission that you came on. Just ditch him.
Yeah. I guess that's a good point. The whole Bill Turcotte thing again was very, 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 very different tonally and obviously plot wise. I don't know that I hate it though. Like that's the
no. Yeah.
It's just like that moment. I agree. Well, so that whole episode, like there's whole episodes toward the beginning of the show, especially where it's almost like comedy of errors, except you're not laughing. It's just what is wrong with this guy? He's such an idiot. I think killing
Frank Dunning.
killing Frank Dunning was like a weird mix of those two things, where I thought the show did a really good job of making Frank Dunning like terrifying, actually.
Josh Duhamel, great actor, did a really good job with that for sure.
Like all that was great, the build up to it, the sense of danger of it. But
I really liked the cow murder scene.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really liked that. I thought that was really effective. That's one of the moments of where the tension of the scene like worked on me, even though I kind of knew nothing permanent was going to happen here.
I think that was like my favorite single adaptation choice. I'm glad you brought it up because of the choice that it puts in Jake's hands. It's like, Jake, you can kill to save the past, but you can't even kill a cow. How are you going to kill Lee Harvey Oswald? How are you going to kill Dunning? And he can't even kill it because and I love that, actually. Like watching that episode, I was like, oh, that's really good. That's like great. Again, show don't tell. Yeah. He's a soft-hearted man. He talks a big game that he's going to kill all these people and right all these wrongs, but he can't even kill an animal when it comes down to it. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. I really liked everything in Kentucky. They moved it from Derry, which they moved it from Derry probably because they didn't want to bring Derry into it, but also just practically they decided to have Jake go to Dallas first, fail miserably, and then decide that he was going to help Harry. Which I'm curious if as you were watching it, you thought as he heads to Dallas right away, if we're just going to skip the Frank Dunning piece of it.
I did
entirely.
I did think that, and I was I like the Frank Dunning part. I think it's important that there be like a sort of orientation, if you will. It's sort of the tutorial level for the story, where we sort of do the thing that we're trying to do, and we see all the ways in which it's going to be hard, and then that primes us for like, okay, now we're getting into like the real shit with Oswald.
Yeah. And I didn't even mind that we did it out of order a little bit, that we went to Dallas first. I think that makes sense as like a TV viewer. If in the pilot episode, you're like not in the city that the assassination takes place in by the end of the episode, people would be like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I think it works there. I think, and then you have to pull it away from Maine, I think, just logically, because you don't want him to like drive all the way back to Maine and then drove all the way back to Dallas. So they just moved it to Kentucky, which is fine. And yeah, I really enjoyed that whole sequence, actually. Like I was, I was going into this remembering I liked it, but also have spent the year since hearing from people that it wasn't really very good. And I'm watching this whole sequence play out, with Jake interacting with Frank Dunning, like doing the cow stuff, like just going to the butchers and the way he's interacting with Frank's wife and all these. And I was like, this stuff's working on me, actually. Like this is really effective storytelling. I'm really appreciating this. I think it's really interesting and tense and good. And I even liked the two characters, the husband and wife that he stays with in the I wish I could remember the name of the town in Kentucky. I really liked that as well. Those two characters. I wish I could remember their names, but like this incredibly like conservative Christian woman and her husband who was in war and had to kill someone in war. And that monologue he gives is for a show that we insulted for having bad dialogue. Like I really appreciated the monologue he gave about having to murder someone. Like all that stuff was working on me really, really well. And I was shocked that when we left that behind and went back to Dallas, I was like, oh, this is lame again, actually.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because that monologue about like killing being just the worst thing you have to do, and then, the inability to kill the cow, and then killing Frank Dunning. Clearly that's what we're doing with this episode, or that I guess maybe it's a pair of episodes. I don't remember what happens exactly where, but it's clearly like, okay, killing is something to be taken seriously. This is not trivial. This is not the time travel munchkinry that we talk about, where it's like you talk about it academically. It's like, no, you're literally going to have to do this act of violence that will change you as a person. And then weirdly, I think we don't ever like refer to or touch upon that theme again a single time that I
Yeah.
can recall.
Yeah, because he does end up killing. Like the speech from the guy is about how, like, people call him a hero for the man he killed during war, and it's like there's no bravery, there's no heroism in killing, and then he has to kill Frank Dunning, and we don't see. And this is I think a Franco problem again, Matt. Like, I just don't buy that event really affected him emotionally, that having
Mhm.
to kill a person. And like the book puts in this work, and the show needs to put in the work as well, because it needs you to understand why he doesn't just walk up to Lee Harvey Oswald and shoot him in the face. Like, this is a thing that this story needs you to understand, because it doesn't function without that. And so I appreciate that we got these moments in the show to help lay that groundwork. But ultimately, I think you're right. The show fails to really pay that off in a way that, like, instead we just have to have Franco kind of say over and over again why he can't just kill Lee Harvey Oswald. Like, there's multiple times where he repeats that
Yeah.
that same excuse, and it's like, we can't dramatize that. We have to just say it through dialogue.
Right. He just has to have arguments with
Yeah.
Bill. I think one change that I liked, actually, maybe even think is just a good idea, was not having him go back and forth so many times. He doesn't save Dunning and then go back to the future and then see, like, oh, Dunning died anyway in Vietnam, and then go back to the past again and then shoot Frank Dunning in the cemetery. And because, like, in the book, I don't think I minded that, in the sense of, like, I wasn't like, oh, come on, this is so slow and repetitive. I thought it was doing different things with all of those elements. But I think in the show, to keep a good pace, it was a good idea to have him go from saving the Dunning family to moving on. And then I think actually it made the ending better for me, because he's learning, like, all at the same time. He's learning that saving Kennedy, basically ruined the world, and even saving the Dunning family didn't save the Dunning family. In some regards, like, they had perhaps even literally worse fates than if they had just died. And I thought that, like, that was a good emotionally impactful scene when Harry Dunning is explaining all these things to him, and you're just like, oh my god, like, it's one of the main bits where you buy, like, oh wow, like, this is so tragic, because he tried so hard, and it's all not only pointless but actually actively backfired, and I felt that, actually. So
I agree. I thought that stuff worked really, really well. I thought his trip back to 2016 at the end was another reason why the last episode worked so well on me, because I thought everything there was pretty well executed.
mm-hmm.
And of course the epilogue, which I think we can end on the end perhaps here today.
Sure.
Loved that entire sequence. Very, very wonderful. I'm so glad they did not decide to put old age makeup on the actress that played Sadie, and they just cast an older woman for her. I'm so glad. I was terrified of that, and and they didn't, and it helped make that scene perfect. And then, like, that, I think the moment where he's dancing with her, and then she turns into the young Sadie, and then turns back into the old woman at the end. Like, like, this is the stuff where, like, not to. We've spoken very ill of this adaptation, and I don't want to make it seem like the adaptation didn't do anything right, because there's a lot that I liked, but, like, that scene, almost like anyone could do it and it'd be amazing, because it's such a good scene in and of itself. Like, the source material is so strong, and the ideas and the concept and the emotions and the feelings and everything behind it is so strong and so wonderful that, like, just put cameras in front of it, and I think it'll work on anyone. I mean, I guess they deserve a certain amount of credit for, like, keeping it essentially the same, like, not wanting to do more with it. So I guess pat on the back for that, but I loved the end. I loved it.
Me too. Yeah, it was. I think I said when we talked about the ending of the book that I felt like this was made to be adapted to the screen.
Yeah.
and it did not let me down. Like, despite the fact that maybe it didn't go exactly the way I saw it in my head, it was faithful. It hit the important notes. I thought like those moments were the main times throughout the whole show where I thought that Franco really pulled his weight as he's reacting to these things and feeling the sadness. Despite the fact that a lot of the movie he just has like, you know, consternation face. It's like, no, the last episode he's sad, and you buy it actually. So yeah, good ending there. Love it.
Yeah. So the one great moment that I love at the end of it is a poem that Sadie Dunhill reads out loud. That was apparently either not written by Deak, but was like one of Deak's favorite poems. I'm pretty sure that poem was not in the book, right? I'm pretty
I don't
sure
remember it. Yeah, I'm 90% sure it's not.
But I really, really liked it. I think it might have. I think it might have been a King poem. I think King might have written it for the show, because maybe it was something that he originally put in the book, and I'm not 100% sure on this. I like tried to do some cursory research and wasn't able to find anything definitively. But it's a very well written poem. I like the quote a lot, so I think it helps elevate the scene, and I'm trying to pull it up as I'm talking. That's why I'm stumbling over my words. But
we did not ask for This Room by Stephen King, a poem from the ending episode of the TV miniseries 11/22/63. Okay, that's cool. I had no idea. I thought it was like some famous poem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the main thing though that's missing from this adaptation is obviously that he's not always trying to tell people that he's working on a novel, and then the novel he's working on is It by Stephen King.
Yeah, I know you're right. There was a real missed opportunity to include that. I agree. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We talked for probably 57 of these 90 minutes about how bad this show was. But ultimately, like, I didn't hate it. Like, I think its worst sin is it's boring at times. Franco is not the best for it. But I think it is what they say, you know, stick the landing and they'll forgive you for anything, because the end was such a high for me that I'm going to leave this thing remembering it fondly, which is kind of a wild thing to happen.
I agree. That was my shocked reaction walking away from this. Is I'm pretty sure we spent most of the last week or two like sending each other snarky little messages back and forth about stuff that annoyed us, and then even at the very end, I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to just rip into this movie as much as I thought I was going to. Although we still kind of did, to be honest. But.
I mean, we did, but like in like a playful, fun way, not like an angry, why did you do this to me way. Like it's not very good. It loses definitely some of the heart and soul of the adaptation itself, but you know, yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, that's life.
The last thing I'll say is they tried really hard to make Franco look out of place in the present and more comfortable in the past by giving him just the worst fucking goatee ever in the present, like just a truly terrible goatee. So I guess that works. He never looked comfortable in the past to me. Like, he never looked like, the first time he puts on the 60s hat, I'm just like, you don't belong here.
Yeah, I will say, you know, sort of conversely, though, I kind of like when he comes back to the future and he's wearing the 60s garb. That was like a fun, it like sold me that he was so comfortable by that point wearing the 60s garb that him wearing the fedora walking around, you know, nuclear blasted town. It was a fun juxtaposition. Like I think mostly it was just I liked the visual of like this guy in 60s outfit with fedora walking around this, you know, Terminator landscape. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, sure. I like that too. I do think it's weird that he just appears like in the middle of the open, just in broad daylight. Just they even still put the drying shed there, but they just made him appear 20 feet from it in just the middle, and like no one comments on this person that's just materialized. Fun choice, I guess. Whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Are you done talking about the show? I think I'm kind of done talking
I
about
think
this
I'm
show.
done. I think I've said my piece.
Yeah. So that's it. That's it for this week's episode. And that's it for 11/22/63. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this show. Did you like it as much as us? Did you hate it as much as us? We are of two minds on the show, clearly, but we want to know what you think.
Yeah, from the comments that I've seen so far, it seems that people do not like it generally. So
Yeah.
perhaps we were too positive, which
whatever.
Which is our thing. Anyway, remember you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or over on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia is the place to hang out. No discussion question this week because we're not doing a book at this exact moment, obviously. Mm-hmm. But those will be starting up again next week.
Yeah. And if you're not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we are starting that new book next week. We are beginning our penultimate book of the series, Matt. We're going to be talking about Mr. Mercedes, and we will be reading this book does not have chapter numbers in it. So we are going to be reading the first two chapters of the book titled Gray Mercedes and Det Ret. I know you know basically next to nothing about this book, Matt, other than it's a crime story. So I'm really excited to get into this one with you.
Me too.
Yeah. So you want to subscribe so you make sure you don't miss Mr. Mercedes. I think it's going to be a fun conversation. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, wherever. You can also buy merch. You should buy merch. It's a good time. Merch time. Head on over to myshopify.com/doofmedia. And that's where you can find all of the merch.
Yes. It's good merch. Mm-hmm. And if you don't feel like particularly buying merch, then head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and just give us some money anyway.
Instead of getting a tangible object you can wear, you get nothing.
You get nothing. No, Scott's joking. What you actually receive is bonus podcasts, which we've been consistently doing for just so long, actually. Yeah. There are so many of them over there.
I agree, and also just the good feeling that you've helped us out, which we will always appreciate. Thank you so much for that. But of course, if you can't do that right now, that is absolutely okay. If you can't afford merch, if you can't afford Patreon, we totally understand. There are tons of ways to help us out. The easiest way is just to share the podcast when you see it posted on social media. Share that stuff. When you see it elsewhere, share it with people, with friends, with coworkers. Just share it. And the other way is to leave us a rating and a review. We do, Matt, have a new review this week. So the books are safe. The books are safe for now. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up this review as I was speaking. I'm not doing a good job. This week's review comes from Of the Saints 13, who gives us 5 stars and says, "I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus does anyone." That's from The Body / Stand By Me, in case you didn't know.
I did know.
Finally, I feel I have walked the wheel enough to put towards my appreciation for the show. Scott and Matt have been amazing members of my digital quartet. All the steps to all the levels of the tower we have walked together has been enjoyable the entire time. I found this podcast about 9 months to a year after they begun and tried to catch up by binging the Tower books and then listening to every podcast related to that book. And by the time I got the Dark Tower, I had to go along show by show alongside Matt and Scott to experience the show appropriately. I almost caught up during the long walk, but that book and analysis wrecked me and I took a break and came back. Kingslingers as a concept was fantastic. Thank you for the dedication by proving a great show experience by releasing on time through illness, providing Patreon content as a consolation during show breaks, do the King Thing writing contest, and the culmination of the live show in Derry, Bangor. Scott and Matt are consummate professionals and deserve all the praise they receive as they remain very humble as well. I look forward to any future projects from Doof Media. Thank you so much for an amazing podcast. You have indeed stood and have been true. Thank you, Cy Matt. Thank you, Cy Scott. Long days and pleasant nights. Oh my goodness. Oh, no. That was so nice.
That was one of those really nice and touching ones that always
I know. I was not prepared for that as I started reading. But thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We are really humble, though. That's true.
And in fact, if I had to put a measurement on it, I would say I'm the most humblest.
Yes. No, you are. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. Thank you. It always makes me happy for some reason to hear that people were as moved by the long walk as I was. It's just feels like I've I share something, with humanity, right?
Honestly, when I read that book for the first time not too long ago during my whole big project with King, that was one of the ones that I was like, if we ever move beyond the Dark Tower, I have to talk about this book with Matt, because I know he will be blown away by it. And so it's so it is so makes me so happy that I was right, and that you enjoyed it, and that other people do as well. This is wonderful. This is why we do it. It's great. Thank you so much for those kind words, and everyone who has given those rating and reviews. As we said, we're moving on to our penultimate book, so we're coming near the end now, and that's starting to emotionally affect me. And Matt, I see 585 ratings on Apple Podcasts right now, and that's an incredible number. And that's just in the US. I was reminded by a Facebook message we got not too long ago that we can't see the reviews on Apple Podcasts that come in from other countries for some stupid reason, but they're out there. We just can't see them.
That's so strange.
So thank you, everyone who has sent those reviews in all during the course of the show. Like we always say this, and I just want to reiterate how much we mean it. Like the fact that someone can open up our podcast right now, see that number of reviews, and see how many of them are positive is a real boon. And I'm sure there's some people out there listening right now that are only listening because they saw that kind of positive feedback. So thank you so much. All right, that's it. That's it for 11/22/63. This has been a wonderful experience, and we are moving on to Mr. Mercedes. So we will begin that book next week. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.